In the year 1850, Great Britain was the source of more than half of the globe's output in iron, coal, and textiles. They were the architects of the railway networks that spanned continents, the builders of naval fleets that commanded the oceans, and the operators of factories that fueled worldwide industrial might. So superior was British engineering that other nations resorted to purchasing British machinery, employing British technicians, and emulating British production methods simply to remain competitive. By the year 1950, however, Great Britain could no longer produce steel at economically viable prices. Their textile mills had fallen silent, and their shipyards lay dormant. The very factories that had once provided employment for millions stood empty. Consequently, Great Britain, the nation that had pioneered the Industrial Revolution, found itself importing manufactured goods from Germany, America, and Japan, a situation that persisted for 100 years. From a position of manufacturing half the world's goods to one of procuring everything from nations they had once inspired, the erstwhile global industrial hub transformed into a post-industrial husk, reliant on financial and service sectors. This decline proved irreversible, with no recovery occurring in the subsequent 75 years. For once manufacturing prowess is lost, it is irrecoverable. As of the present year, 2025, the United States is mirroring Great Britain's trajectory precisely, approximately 170 years behind them on an identical path. We are witnessing factory closures, erosion of market share, and increased reliance on imports from competitors we once outpaced. We are presently in the fourth stage of the same five-stage progression that irrevocably dismantled Britain's industrial foundation. Britain was not an isolated case. In 1950, Detroit held the distinction of being America's most affluent city, the undisputed global capital of automotive manufacturing. By the year 2013, Detroit was forced to declare bankruptcy. Before we delve into the pattern, it is essential to grasp the true significance of manufacturing for a nation's strength, not in abstract economic theories but in tangible realities. Manufacturing transcends mere production. It embodies technological capability, ensures supply chain resilience, underpins national security, and provides well-paying, stable employment that sustains families and communities. The act of creation through manufacturing cultivates engineers who drive innovation, trains laborers who acquire valuable skills, and establishes supply chains that foster entire interconnected networks of supporting enterprises. A single automotive assembly plant not only employs auto workers, but also generates demand for steel providers, component manufacturers, tool and die specialists, logistics firms, engineers, and designers. Each manufacturing job is estimated to support 5 additional jobs within the local economy. A thriving manufacturing sector invariably leads to a flourishing middle class, as factory positions typically offer substantial remuneration. These roles often do not necessitate a university degree or accumulating debt, as proficiency can be acquired through on-the-job training, leading to a good salary, the ability to purchase a home, support a family, and accumulate wealth. This was the essence of the American dream, forged in the heart of factories. However, when manufacturing falters, so too does this dream. Jobs vanish, skills become obsolete, supply chains relocate overseas, and their repatriation becomes impossible. Once manufacturing capability is lost, when factories cease operations, workers retire, and accumulated knowledge dissipates, the process of rebuilding can take decades, if it is achievable at all. In every instance where a nation has lost its manufacturing base, a true recovery has never materialized. These nations become dependent on others for their manufactured goods, for their technological advancements, and for their security. Manufacturing is power, and its loss constitutes national self-destruction. Let us examine how this has unfolded 3 times previously, and why it is currently repeating. Returning to Great Britain, we recount the complete narrative of how the world's industrial powerhouse became a desolate landscape of abandoned factories. In 1850, Great Britain stood as the undisputed global leader in manufacturing. The Industrial Revolution, which had commenced there in the 1760s, had by 1850 propelled Britain to a position of dominance in worldwide production. They generated over 50% of the world's iron, over 50% of its coal, and over 40% of its manufactured goods. British textiles clothed the globe. British steel facilitated the construction of transcontinental railways, and British vessels navigated global trade routes. British factories represented the pinnacle of technological advancement worldwide. This period marks stage 1, manufacturing supremacy, technological leadership, and unparalleled production capacity. Great Britain possessed every conceivable advantage. They were the originators of seminal inventions such as the steam engine, the power loom, the Bessemer steel process, railways, and the telegraph, all British innovations. They had abundant deposits of coal and iron ore. Their vast empire provided access to international markets, and they commanded significant capital for investment. Furthermore, they possessed a highly skilled workforce proficient in manufacturing. Such was Britain's overwhelming superiority that they embraced free trade, as no other nation could realistically compete. Why implement tariffs when victory was assured? However, dominance is inherently transient, for prosperity invariably breeds emulation. This leads to stage 2, the emergence of competitors who replicate and refine existing technologies. During the mid-19th century, Germany and the United States began their own industrialization processes. They meticulously studied British methodologies, acquired British machinery, and engaged British engineers. Subsequently, they innovated and improved upon these foundations. Germany, in particular, made substantial investments in technical education, establishing engineering schools that provided a superior training to Britain's apprenticeship system. German corporations like Krupp and Siemens became pioneers in steel production and electrical engineering. By the year 1900, Germany was producing more steel than Great Britain. The United States benefited from inherent advantages, including vast natural resources, unlike Britain's limitations. They possessed abundant oil reserves, a larger domestic market, and entrepreneurial titans such as Carnegie and Rockefeller, who constructed industrial empires leveraging the most advanced technologies available. By 1900, the United States had surpassed both Britain and Germany in steel production combined. This represents stage 3, a decline in market share and escalating competition. Today, Great Britain is an importer of nearly all manufactured goods. They can no longer produce steel at competitive pricing. Their final coal mines have been shuttered, and they import manufactured products from nations like China, Germany, and other parts of Asia. The indelible lesson from Great Britain's experience is this: once manufacturing dominance is relinquished, recovery is unattainable. Technology advances, competitors surpass you, and being the originator holds no advantage when others can produce more effectively and economically. Yet Britain was an established empire, and one might argue that a singular, concentrated industrial center might possess greater resilience. Detroit's fate unequivocally disproved this notion. Let us fast forward to 1950. Detroit, Michigan, the undisputed Motor City. In 1950, Detroit boasted the highest per capita income in America and was the nucleus of the automotive industry. The Big Three, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, were all headquartered there. Collectively, they directly employed 250,000 individuals in Detroit, with hundreds of thousands more employed in ancillary industries, including parts suppliers, tool and die manufacturers, steel mills, and rubber factories, forming a complete automotive supply chain. This signifies stage 1, manufacturing dominance and specialization within a singular industry. For residents of Detroit, employment was directly or indirectly tied to the automotive sector. The compensation was exceptional, with United Auto Workers union jobs commanding wages equivalent to $25 to $30 per hour in today's currency, supplemented by benefits, healthcare coverage, pensions, and job security. A high school graduate could secure factory employment, purchase a home, provide for their family, and retire comfortably. This was the tangible realization of the American dream. Detroit's population peaked at 1.8 million in 1950, coinciding with the nation's highest per capita income. The city saw the construction of a comprehensive highway system, suburban expansion, and a vibrant downtown with theaters, department stores, and restaurants. The city was experiencing unprecedented prosperity. However, this very dominance fostered a sense of complacency. This brings us to stage 2, the emergence of competitors who refine the existing model. During the 1960s and 70s, Japanese automakers began entering the American market, including brands like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Initially, American manufacturers largely dismissed them, viewing their vehicles as small, inexpensive, and of inferior quality. However, the Japanese industry experienced rapid improvement. They meticulously studied American manufacturing processes and subsequently enhanced them. They pioneered concepts such as lean manufacturing, just-in-time inventory, and Kaizen continuous improvement. The vehicles they produced were superior, characterized by greater reliability, improved fuel efficiency, and lower maintenance costs. The oil crisis of 1973, which led to a surge in gasoline prices, rendered American muscle cars undesirable. Consumers increasingly sought fuel efficiency, a demand that Japanese automobiles effectively met. The American Big Three, conversely, continued to produce the same large, inefficient, and unreliable vehicles, operating under the flawed assumption that American consumers would perpetually prioritize domestic products. This assumption proved incorrect, ushering in Stage 3, a decline in market share and the commencement of offshoring. By the 1980s, Japanese automakers had captured 30% of the American market. The Big Three were experiencing a significant hemorrhaging of market share. Their primary response was cost reduction, leading to the closure of Detroit factories and the relocation of production to lower-cost regions such as Tennessee and Mexico, where labor expenses were considerably less. Detroit's automotive employment plummeted from 250,000 in 1950 to just 100,000 by 1990, a decline that continued unabated. This leads to Stage 4, an acceleration of factory closures and the disappearance of jobs. The 2000s were catastrophic for Detroit. The financial crisis of 2008 nearly decimated General Motors and Chrysler, both of which were forced to declare bankruptcy. While the government provided bailouts, the Detroit factories never reopened. Ford, despite surviving without a bailout, also closed numerous Detroit facilities. Let us now examine the American Rust Belt between 1970 and 2020. The Rust Belt constitutes the industrial heartland of America, encompassing states such as Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. In 1970, this region was the engine of American production, supplying the steel, machinery, and goods that built the nation. Pittsburgh was the recognized steel capital. Cleveland was renowned for its steel and machinery production. Youngstown was synonymous with steel, as was Gary, Indiana. Akron was the center for rubber manufacturing, and Buffalo was a hub of industrial activity. This marks Stage 1, widespread manufacturing dominance across multiple sectors. In 1970, the United States produced 20% of the world's steel. U.S. Steel alone employed 300,000 individuals. Bethlehem Steel provided employment for 165,000, and Republic Steel, LTV Steel, and numerous other companies employed millions in steel production and associated industries. These were well-compensated, unionized positions, earning wages equivalent to $30 to $40 per hour in today's dollars. Along with comprehensive benefits and pensions, an individual could graduate from high school, secure employment at a steel mill, and retire 30 years later with a full pension. Entire communities were established around these mills. Youngstown, Ohio, with a population of 170,000 in 1970, was fundamentally built around its steel industry. However, the rest of the world was rapidly advancing. This brings us to Stage 2, the emergence of competitors employing modern technologies. In the 1970s, Germany, Japan, and South Korea constructed new steel mills utilizing the latest advancements, such as electric arc furnaces and continuous casting processes. These technologies were significantly more efficient than the outdated American blast furnaces, and these nations also benefited from lower labor costs. American steelworkers earned approximately $25 per hour, while Korean steelworkers received as little as $3 per hour. The economic disparity was stark. By 1980, American steel had become uncompetitive. It was more cost-effective to import foreign steel than to produce it domestically. Instead of modernizing their facilities, American steel companies opted to lobby for tariffs and implement cost-cutting measures. This marked the onset of offshoring. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, American steel plants began to close, initially the least efficient, followed by the obsolescent integrated mills. Companies faced bankruptcy. U.S. Steel reduced its workforce from 300,000 to 50,000. Bethlehem Steel filed for bankruptcy in 2001, LTV Steel in 2000, and Republic Steel ceased to exist entirely. Entire corporate entities were erased. This decline was not confined to the steel industry. Manufacturing across the entire Rust Belt experienced a collapse. Textile production shifted to China, electronics manufacturing moved to Asia, and machinery production was relocated to Mexico. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, enacted in 1994, further accelerated this offshoring trend. Companies could establish factories in Mexico, pay workers approximately $2 per hour instead of $25, and import goods duty-free. Tens of thousands of factories migrated. This leads to Stage 4, an accelerated rate of factory closures and a precipitous decline in employment. The 2000s delivered the final devastating blow. China's accession to the World Trade Organization in 2001 triggered an explosion in its manufacturing sector. By 2010, China was producing more steel than the entire remainder of the world combined. They became the global manufacturing hub for virtually every product, from textiles and electronics to machinery, tools and furniture, all offered at prices American factories could not match. The Rust Belt experienced a catastrophic loss of jobs, with manufacturing employment falling from 19 million in 1980 to 11 million by 2010, an elimination of 8 million jobs. These lost positions were not replaced by employment of equivalent value. A factory worker earning $60,000 annually might find themselves in a retail position earning $25,000, if fortunate. Entire towns withered. Youngstown's population dwindled from 170,000 to 60,000. The steel mills were either demolished or abandoned, leaving behind vacant land. Gary, Indiana, saw its population drop from 175,000 to 69,000, with entire city blocks becoming deserted. Flint, Michigan, a victim of the automotive industry's collapse, experienced a 50% population decrease. Akron, once the rubber capital, saw its industry vanish. Buffalo's manufacturing base disappeared. These cities became poignant symbols of industrial demise, characterized by high unemployment, pervasive poverty, and widespread drug epidemics. The opioid crisis disproportionately impacted the Rust Belt, as individuals facing hopelessness, joblessness, and a lack of future prospects turned to substance abuse. Factories that had once employed thousands were reduced to derelict ruins or completely leveled, leaving behind empty expanses. The crucial lesson from the Rust Belt experience is this: when manufacturing departs, it takes entire communities with it, and the jobs never return. We have examined three distinct yet analogous examples: Great Britain, Detroit, and the Rust Belt. All have followed the identical five-stage pattern of industrial decline, and presently the entire United States is embarking on the same trajectory. Let us dissect this pattern, as it is remarkably consistent across all instances. Stage 1. Manufacturing dominance and technological leadership. This was exemplified by Britain in 1850, Detroit in 1950, the Rust Belt in 1970, and the United States as a whole in 1950 and 1970. In each case, they represented the pinnacle of efficiency, advancement, and productivity. This very success, however, fostered complacency. Stage 2. The emergence of competitors who replicate and improve upon existing technologies. Germany and the United States emulated Britain. Japan followed Detroit's model. China learned from the Rust Belt. In every scenario, the aspiring competitors meticulously studied the established leader, adopted successful strategies, enhanced them, and often combined these with lower labor costs. Critically, the incumbent leader tended to dismiss these emerging rivals, asserting their inherent superiority in quality and claiming they would never catch up, a consistently erroneous assumption. This leads to Stage 3, a decline in market share and the initiation of offshoring. Britain began losing market share to Germany and America by 1900. Detroit saw its market share erode to Japan by 1980. The Rust Belt experienced a similar decline to China by 2000. The response from the dominant players, rather than investing in innovation, was to cut costs and, instead of investing in domestic capabilities, to relocate production to more cost-effective locales. This strategy invariably exacerbated the decline. Stage 4. An acceleration of factory closures and the vanishing of jobs. This was evident in Britain during the 1930s and 50s, in Detroit in the 2000s, and in the Rust Belt from 2000 to 2020. Once factories close, they rarely reopen. Displaced workers do not find comparable employment opportunities, and their communities suffer severe consequences. The United States collectively is currently navigating this stage. Since 2000, America has lost 5 million manufacturing jobs. Factories have shuttered nationwide. Our trade deficit has ballooned, with imports exceeding exports by $800 billion annually. Stage 5. Complete deindustrialization and economic dependency. Britain reached this stage by 1950, becoming an importer of virtually all goods. Detroit achieved this state by 2013, with its automotive industry effectively vanished from the city. The Rust Belt arrived at this point by 2020, with steel production largely concentrated in China and other manufactured goods originating from Asia. The United States is now entering Stage 5. Let us assess America's current position. We are firmly in Stage 4, with a strong likelihood of transitioning into Stage 5. Manufacturing's contribution to gross domestic product has diminished from 28% in 1950 to 11% currently. While the population has nearly doubled since 1980, our capacity for large-scale manufacturing has eroded. We are unable to produce essential pharmaceuticals domestically. 80% of the active ingredients in American medications are manufactured in China or India. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we lacked the domestic capacity to produce masks, ventilators, or personal protective equipment, necessitating imports from China. We cannot produce our own electronics. While iPhones are designed in California, every component is manufactured in Asia, as we lack the requisite supply chains and skilled workforce for domestic assembly. We are not self-sufficient in steel production, importing more than we produce. China manufactures 1 billion tons of steel annually, while the United States produces a mere 80 million tons. This renders us dependent. We possess negligible capacity for shipbuilding. China constructs 40% of the world's vessels, while America accounts for less than 1%. Even our Navy relies on ships constructed abroad. We cannot produce advanced semiconductors. Taiwan accounts for 90% of the world's advanced chip production. Should China seize control of Taiwan, our access to the chips that power everything from automobiles and weaponry to computers would be jeopardized. We have hollowed out our manufacturing base, and its reconstruction would require decades and trillions of dollars, assuming it is even feasible, given the dissipation of expertise. The workers who possess the knowledge to operate these factories have either retired or passed away. Supply chains have migrated to Asia, and machinery has been sold or scrapped. It is not a simple matter of flipping a switch to reactivate American manufacturing. We have forfeited 50 years of accumulated capability. The economic repercussions are profoundly dire. A trade deficit of $800 billion annually, representing $800 billion annually that leaves the country permanently. The eradication of middle-class employment. Manufacturing jobs that once offered salaries of $60,000 to $80,000 with benefits have been replaced by service sector positions, paying $30,000 to $40,000 with no benefits, thereby decimating the middle class. We face economic dependence on China, which could potentially restrict our access to pharmaceuticals, electronics, and manufactured goods, granting them considerable leverage over us. Our national security is compromised. In the event of conflict with China, we would lack the industrial capacity to manufacture the necessary armaments, a capability China possesses. Stage 5 represents complete deindustrialization, and we are perilously close to achieving it. At our current pace, within an additional 5 years, American manufacturing will be functionally extinct, and we will subsist as a service-based economy, reliant on finance, technology, and entertainment without producing any tangible goods. Service economies are insufficient to sustain global superpowers. Manufacturing is the bedrock. Britain learned this lesson, transitioning from a superpower to a secondary nation following its loss of manufacturing. America is currently undergoing a similar painful education. 3 historically dominant manufacturing powerhouses, Britain, Detroit, and the Rust Belt, all succumbed to the identical 5-stage pattern of industrial demise. Each, at its zenith, believed itself too powerful to fail. All underestimated their competitors. Each prioritized short-term financial gains over long-term industrial viability, and all ultimately lost virtually everything. Their factories closed, their jobs evaporated, their communities disintegrated, and none ever achieved a meaningful recovery. America now stands at stage 4, a single stage removed from complete deindustrialization, one step away from absolute economic reliance on China, and one stage from forfeiting the industrial foundation that propelled us to superpower status. The most brutal truth is this: once manufacturing is lost, it is irretrievably lost. Great Britain has not rebuilt its industrial capacity in 75 years. Detroit has not recovered in 50 years. The Rust Belt continues its decline 40 years later. The established pattern indicates that once Stage 5 is fully realized, it is permanent. We have been presented with 3 stark warnings, 3 instances of identical collapses, 3 exemplars of the consequences when nations cease to produce. And America is now charting the precise same course. The only uncertainty lies in the timeline. How long until Stage 5 is consummated? Perhaps 5 years. Or perhaps it has already arrived, and we have simply been unwilling to acknowledge it. Nevertheless, the data indicates we are one stage away from irreversible decline. If this revelation has illuminated the extent of our losses and the direction we are headed, please subscribe. For when Stage 5 is complete, when America is rendered incapable of producing anything, you will need to comprehend how we arrived at this juncture and why we failed to foresee it. The answers are not hidden in the future. They are etched in the rust and ruins of Great Britain, Detroit, and the Rust Belt, and I will demonstrate precisely where to find them.